I'm Eli the Computer Guy, and today's class is Introduction to MySQL Databases for Website Administrators. That's a mouthful to say. This actually should be a pretty short and sweet class. All I'm going to do is give you an overview of how to interact with a MySQL database if you have to use MySQL for your website. If you're using something like WordPress or Drupal, those pieces of web software use MySQL as their backbone. So in order to really be able to administer them, you have to have at least a decent idea of how to work with MySQL. Databases, just so you have an understanding, databases are pieces of software that all they do is store and help you manipulate data, pure raw data and information. So basically, there's nothing flashy about a database. There's no cool 3D effects with a database. Databases just store massive amounts of data, like Amazon.com's contact list or inventory. Think about all the products that Amazon.com has. They store all those the product listings within a database. So you can have millions and millions of records in a database, and the database is used to keep track of all that. MySQL databases are the kind of the default standard for websites. The reason is MySQL is an open source and free database, unlike Oracle databases or Microsoft databases. The reason is way back when MySQL was created, the company decided that their business model would be to give away the software and then charge you out the nose for support. So this meant that the average geek at home could play around with full amazing enterprise class software and not pay a dime. But if an enterprise wanted to use a software, they would need support to make sure everything worked 100% of the time. Unlike Oracle and Microsoft, which decided basically to charge out the nose for the software and for the support. So MySQL is completely free, it's completely open source, and that's why it's become the standard on the web. Like I said before, if you use very popular pieces of web software like WordPress or Drupal, they use MySQL as their backbone. So that's the introduction to this class. Give me a second and we'll go into to really understand a little bit about more about how databases work. So as I said, MySQL database is basically just to collect data, collect large amounts of pure data. So in order to make a MySQL database work, you install the MySQL software onto the computer that's going to be running the MySQL databases. If you're using a shared hosting, if you're paying the $5 or $10 a month to have your website hosted somewhere, they've already installed the MySQL software so that you can use it. One of the things to realize is that, again, when you deal with MySQL in the real world for real database administrators, basically what you interact with is something that looks like a DOS prompt. You have a DOS prompt, you type in something called SQL statements. These are commands that go into the database, and basically it's a lot of memorization and you have to know exactly what you're saying. To make life easier, basically, most people use something called PHPMyAdmin in order to access the database in a graphical environment. So instead of just looking at a little DOS prompt, you can use this piece of software called PHPMyAdmin, and it creates nice little pictures and gives you an interface that looks more like a website, so that you can interact with the database much more easily than having to type in SQL statements all the time. So that's one thing to realize when you're dealing with the databases, is that really accessing or administering the database, you actually write out SQL statements to the database. How most of us use the MySQL databases is you use a tool called PHPMyAdmin and access the database that way. Again, if you're using shared hosting, then it's there for you. You'll just click on a little button and go to the PHPMyAdmin. If you are running your own Linux server or your own server, you have to install PHPMyAdmin in order to be able to use it. So now that we've gone over how you're going to access it, the next thing to think about is how the data is actually stored. So like I said, this is all just pure raw data. So when you install, or somebody else has installed the SQL Server software, then within the SQL Server software you create a database. The database is the largest container for information. So if you have a WordPress website, all the information for that WordPress website basically is going to be stored within that database. If you're using Drupal, all the information will be stored within that database. Within the database, there are multiple tables. So each individual table contains a specific type of information. So let's say users. So if you have a membership website, there will be one table specifically for users or members. There may be another table if you have classes for classes. There may be another table for inventory. There may be another table for vendors. So each table represents one specific type of information. Now, when you go in and you're using PHPMyAdmin to take a look at the databases, it will look a lot like an Excel spreadsheet. So you'll have your little table. You have columns, and then you have rows. So columns go up to down, rows go left to right, vertical, horizontal. Columns tell you what type of information you're collecting. So let's say these are your members. So you have a membership website. So the first column is normally the membership number. What is their membership ID? The second column would be what is their, let's say, last name. The third would be what is their first name. And then let's say what is their email address. So if you looked at this table in PHPMyAdmin, you would look at these columns and you would know the first column is the number, the second column is the last name, the first column is the third column is the first name, and fourth column is email addresses. That's what you're collecting. The rows go left to right, are the records. So these are the individual people. So member number 1, last name is Thompson. First name is Bob. Email address is bob@aol.com. So this is the first record on this row. Member number 2 is last name is Forth. I don't know. First name is Janet. Email address is janet@gmail.com. So columns represent the types of information that you're gathering, and rows are the actual records. So each individual record. So this is basically how the database stores the data, and this is how you will look at it when you're looking at it through PHPMyAdmin. So just keep this in mind. Like I say, is how professionals, quote unquote professionals, deal with the database is actually through something called SQL statements that look a lot like DOS prompts. You're not going to do that. You're going to use something called PHPMyAdmin to access and administer your database. When you're in the database, realize that the database is the largest container for information. So all of the information for your website should be in one database. That database is made up of multiple tables. Each one of those tables contains certain types of information. Like I said, customers, vendors, inventory, each one of those tables will target a specific thing. Within the table, when you're looking at the table, columns represent the type of information that you want. Like I say, last name, first name, email address, whatever. Rows represent the actual records. So member 1 is Thompson bob@aol.com. Member 2 is Forth Janet@janet.gmail.com. Just keep this in mind. Databases get a lot more complicated than this, but right now this is all you really need to understand. Now that you understand basically how a database is structured, we need to talk about how you connect to the database using web software. The first thing that you should understand about databases is databases allow you to have users passwords and privileges just like an entire operating system can. So you can give users the ability to administer certain databases or certain tables within databases. They can read things, they can add things, they can delete things. You can change what individual users can do per database or per table. So just keep that in mind, that databases have users and permissions just like an operating system. The next thing is that if you are using web software that will connect to a database, you have to be able to tell that software where the database is. So if the software that you are running is on the exact same server as the database, you tell the software to connect to localhost. So localhost tells the software that the database server is on the same computer that it's running from. Now, if it's not on the same computer that it's running from, you need to be able to tell it that. So a lot of the shared hosting does not have the database server on the same server where your website is located. So if you create a database that you need to connect to, you need to go through the little information that your web hosting provider gives you and find out where that host is to tell your database software. It's basically when you're using something like WordPress or any of these other types of software that use databases, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to tell that software where the database is. You are then going to have to tell the software what database to connect to. So like I told you before, one server can hold multiple databases. So you're going to have to say, go to this server, connect to this database, and then use whatever username you created and whatever password you created. So you have to understand that about connecting to the database. Like I say, if your database is on the same server where your website is, you can put in localhost and you'll be fine. Most of these shared providers will tell you that your MySQL database is on a different server than where your website is, and so you will have to put in the address that they're talking about. I hope this has made a bit of sense. Let's go on to the computer and I'll show you how some of this works.
So right now we're sitting at my GoDaddy Hosting Control Center page, so I can show you basically how you would interact with a MySQL database if you're using a web hosting provider. Like I say, if you're using one-on-one hosting or Bluefish hosting or some other hosting, your panels will look different, but they'll basically be the same but different, as they say in Thailand. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to go down to databases, and then we click on MySQL Database. This brings us to the page that shows us how many databases we currently have. So on my account, I have 2 databases here, and also allows you to create a database. So if you need to create a database, again, for WordPress or Drupal or any of that, all you do is you would go and you click on Create Database. You then give it its description. This is a test. Then you give the database the name of the database and the username of the database all in one thing. So if you control your own MySQL database, the name of the database and the username will normally be different. If you use a hosting provider, then the name of your database and the username will probably be the same. So we'll just call this etcg test. Or say MySQL test. Password. And that's basically all you do, and then hit confirm. The other thing is there are different versions of MySQL. So if you're using a hosted solution, you can choose whether you use 4.1 or 5.0. I would generally say that you should always use 5.0 unless there's specific reason to use 4.1. If you're using a specific type of web software, it may require that you use 4.1, but unless it says that you have to, use the highest level you can. So 5.0. And then we just hit OK. Now again, if you control your own database server, this process of creating a database, once you hit go, will take 50 seconds, 40 seconds, 5 seconds. It's really, really quick. If you are using a hosting solution, then it'll take half an hour or an hour or 2 hours. So just realize that after you create your database, if you're using a hosted solution, that it can take a while. Like I say, it can take up to an hour. So I do want to show you an example of the configurations page where you may have to enter that database information. This is the sample configuration page for WordPress. And if you'll notice, there's a few fields here where you have to put in your database information. So MySQL Database username, you would actually write in your username here. You would write in your password. Down here, the MySQL hostname, this is the location of where your MySQL database is located. So if your MySQL database is located on the same server that hosts your website, then you put localhost. If it is on a different server, then you have to put in the full web address of what that other server is. Oh, and then also up here, the DB name, this is where you put your database name. So whether you're using Drupal or WordPress or any other web software that uses a MySQL database, there's normally one of these configuration files. All they are little text files, and in them you have to put this information about your database. So the database name, the database user, database password, and the database host. That is where the database is located. And again, it's not necessarily localhost. You have to make sure you know where it's at. Now when your database is up and running, you'll have this little link here that says manage via PHPMyAdmin. So once your database is fully up, you can just click a little link and that'll take you to the PHPMyAdmin so you can administer your database. I have a database on a different server that we'll show you how to use since it actually has some information in it. So you'll come to this login page and then you'll log in. Once you're logged in, you'll be presented with this screen. So what you're looking at here is over here on the left-hand side. These are the databases that you have on your server. So there's an Eli the Computer Guy database, there's an EMIT database, there's an ETCG database. Information Schema, MySQL, and PHPMyAdmin are databases too, but they're all simply for administrative purposes. You never touch them. Then along the top there's a bunch of different information. The big one here is the ability to either import or export. So if you want to back up your entire database, you can click on export. You go over here, you decide which database you want to back up. So you would say like Eli the Computer Guy. And then to make your life easier, if all you're doing is backing up your entire database, this is the different format that you can back up your database in. I would suggest you always leave it in SQL. If this is the language that databases understand, and if you have to recover your database from your backup, you'll be much happier if it's in SQL. And then all you do is you go down. If you're backing up your database, make sure you check this Save As. If you don't check Save As, it won't actually save your database for some reason. You can then put the file name that you want, test backup, and then you can say whether or not you want this backup compressed. Do you want it zipped, gzipped, or bzipped? And then you hit go. And if you hit go, it will then create a backup file of all of your database. If you need to recover or if you're moving your database from one server to the other, you can just then go to import. You can go to browse. You can browse to that SQL backup file that you created, and then you hit go, and that will import the entire database. So that's what you would do to basically to back up a database and to import a database. Now, if we go over the Eli the Computer Guy database, this is an old database. Now we can go in and we can see all the tables that were used for this website. So there's an access table, there's an add table, there's an aggregator table. All these are different tables that contain different types of information. So this add, there was an advertisement piece of software. So these add tables controlled how the advertising software worked. There's posts. So this table actually contains all of the posts that I put on this particular blog. So you can see the number, the post ID. You can see the post date when it was posted, post content, the title of the post. All of this information is stored actually in the database. When you look at it, it looks all fancy and nice on the website, but this is how it's actually stored in the database. If I click on this edit button, we can go in and we can see all the information. Content including pages and node, location, etc. Now, one of the best parts about understanding how to use or navigate through this database software is you can extract data. So if we go here to WP users, this is the users section of this old site. This is actually filled with a lot of garbage information. But basically, whenever anybody would sign up for a site, or whenever anybody signs up for Everyman IT, all of their information gets put into a users table. And so this users table, we'll go over here to structure, gives a login, gives a password, it takes their email address, it takes their web address, it takes all of that information and stores it in a single table. So if we go over here, we can see people's email addresses. So there's my email address, and then like I say, these are all actually fake email addresses, but bkutra@Ars Technica, email@Ars Technica. So these are all email addresses. Well, what's great is, since I showed you that export function before, now that we're at this table, we can export this table. So I can click on export. And then what I want to do now, I want to actually grab the email addresses out of this table. So if you're on my email list, this is how I put all of your email addresses into my Constant Contact email blast software. Instead of exporting the data as SQL, I actually go up and export the data as Microsoft Excel. I go down here, save table as, and I hit go. And now, since it downloaded that quick, I can actually open up the table. I click yes. And now look at this. I've downloaded the table, but it's now an Excel spreadsheet. And what I can do is I can now grab and I can copy just the email addresses here. So I don't have to use all that other information. I can just simply grab all these email addresses and then paste that into the Constant Contact. So this is the type of thing that you can do if you understand how to navigate through the MySQL database. So that's basically all there is to it for today. Like I say, going through the database, it gets really complicated if you're trying to program a database, but just basic stuff isn't too complicated. Such as if you want to go down the WP, if you're using WordPress, WP options contains all the basic information about how your website runs. So this is where you actually put your website's domain name into WordPress to make it work properly. This is where you put the administration email address if you want it. Posts per RSS feed, RSS excerpt length. So if you have an RSS feed from your blog, this says how long that RSS feed should be. And there's all this kind of information that's stored in the database. All you have to do to be able to edit any of this information is you just go over to this little pencil icon and you can click it, and now you can edit it. So if I wanted to change the administrator email address for this blog, I could just change it right in here. I'm not once, and then you hit go. Since I don't actually want to change it, I'm not going to hit go. If you want to delete fields or records entirely, you can click on this X here. Generally, don't do that though. If you're still new, don't start clicking lots of X's. But basically, that's the MySQL database for you. Let's go out to the real world and have some last words.
So what we've gone over today is basically 90 to 95% of all you're ever really going to have to understand about MySQL databases. Just realize that MySQL databases are used to contain information. They just have pure nasty information in them. They don't look cool, they don't look fancy, they just sit there and store data. I've shown you how to use PHPMyAdmin, which is the graphical interface that allows you to go in and administer your MySQL databases. Just about everybody in the world uses PHPMyAdmin to administer MySQL databases. So whether you're using GoDaddy or oneandone.com or Bluefish or whoever else, once you click on the little manage panel, like however you get to the button to manage your MySQL databases, once you click on that button, you will go to PHPMyAdmin and it will look basically like what I showed you today. The important things to remember are that how to back up or export your entire database. You should do this every once in a while. You should do this just as a normal backup procedure. Is you go in there on that first page, you click export, and then you export whatever database you want to back up and export it in the SQL format. This is very important because if you're using this as a backup file, if it is in the SQL format, it is much easier to re-import that into a new server if your old server dies. So you just hit export into SQL, you're fine. If you need to recover, all you do is you click on the little import tab, you point it at that SQL file that you exported before, you import it, and it's about that quick. There's not a whole lot to it. When you're in there, you should go in. If you're using MySQL for a WordPress blog or Drupal or any of that, go in now and take a look at the tables and see what information that the tables contain. You should be comfortable just navigating through and opening up individual records and seeing what's there. The final thing is remember is if you're setting up web software that requires the use of MySQL, like WordPress or Drupal, just remember that you need the database name, you need the username, you need the password, and you need the location of that MySQL server. So a lot of people make that mistake is they leave that location as localhost and then they rip their hair out because they can't figure out why WordPress isn't getting installed properly. Well, the reason is because you're not giving it the proper location for that SQL server. So that's it in a nutshell. This class was Introduction to MySQL Databases for Website Administrators. I'm Eli the Computer Guy, and I look forward to seeing you at the next class.